Our movie begins with a young man named Dalton, locked in a very small room for an unknown reason. Dalton decides to confess and tell the story from the beginning, explaining the reason for his imprisonment. We go back to a few days before Dalton's confession, and we see him disguised in a maintenance worker's outfit, entering a crowded bank where everyone is busy. This allowed him to go unnoticed as he pointed his flashlight toward the cameras and, in a strange way, managed to disable them in seconds. At the bank's back door, the rest of the disguised gang entered, locking the door tightly. When one of the bank employees saw them, Dalton appeared from behind, threatening him with a weapon, ordering him to lie on the ground immediately. In moments, the bank robbery began as they threw gas bombs, forcing everyone inside to lie down and put their hands behind their backs. Meanwhile, a neighborhood officer passed by the bank, noticing the strange gas coming out of the building. As he approached the door, he was startled by a gunman who opened the door and pointed a gun at him, informing him that they had hostages and warning him to stay away, or they would start killing them one by one. After the gunman shut the door, the officer immediately contacted the police station, reporting the robbery and calling for backup and special forces. At the same time, Arthur, the bank's manager, received the shocking news of the robbery. Arthur was shaken, but his anxiety grew when he found out that the robbery was happening at the bank's first and oldest branch, the one Arthur had built over the years. Meanwhile, Detective Fraser was at the police station talking with his girlfriend, making plans to go out. But then he received the news of the bank robbery, and his boss instructed him to head to the scene with his partner Bill to investigate. Upon arriving, Fraser saw that the special forces had already arrived, led by Officer Jake. Fraser gathered information from the neighborhood officer, who told him about the armed robbers' threat. However, they couldn't determine how many robbers were inside due to the locked door and the effect of the gas bombs on the officer's vision. Inside the bank, the gang rounded up all the hostages, taking their phones and car keys. One employee claimed he had left his phone at home. Dalton spoke to him, giving him a chance to hand over the phone before he found it himself and killed him. But the employee insisted he didn't have it. Dalton learned his name and started searching through the employee's phones until he found it and called the number. The sound of the phone rang from the employee's desk. Dalton dragged him to the office and beat him brutally, making an example of him for the other hostages. After that, the rest of the hostages handed over everything without hiding anything. The gang then gave the hostages clothes identical to their disguises, forcing them to wear them, making it impossible for the police to distinguish between the real robbers and the hostages. News of the crime quickly spread, with the media and press covering the event. Detective Fraser entered with Bill, instructing him to keep him updated on any developments. After getting a bulletproof vest from Bill, Fraser walked around the bank, studying the situation with his partner. Inside the bank, one of the hostages, an elderly man, fell ill due to his deteriorating health. Dalton decided to let him out before he died. The special forces received the elderly man, searched him, and escorted him to an ambulance. Fraser returned to the front of the bank and got an update from Jake, learning that there were 4 armed robbers with gas bombs inside. The robbers had sent a message through the elderly hostage, threatening to kill 2 of the hostages and throw their bodies in front of the bank if they saw any police officers near the door. Jake informed Fraser that he had disabled all the bank's phones and rerouted them to police lines to prevent the gang from communicating with anyone else. Additionally, they were monitoring all the hostages' phones inside the bank. Fraser suggested that they initiate contact with the robbers to find out their demands in exchange for the hostages. Jake agreed, and he and his team started working on hacking into the bank's security cameras to keep an eye on the situation inside. As for Arthur, he contacts White, who is the manager of a well-known company. In addition to that, she has a knack for getting things done for big business people in the country due to her extensive public relations and her cleverness in persuasion and evasion. Arthur asks her to meet because he has an urgent matter to discuss. When they meet, Arthur tells her about the incident that occurred at one of the branches of his bank and asks for her help in preventing the gang from stealing a specific safe in the bank, no matter the cost. White feels suspicious about the safe, and because of Arthur's insistence on his request, she realizes that the safe belongs to him and that there is a secret behind it that could negatively affect his life. Arthur actually confirms her feelings when he tells her that the safe contains important documents that he has had for many years, and he hopes those documents will remain a secret and out of sight, or else his professional life will be ruined. In the end, White agrees to help him in exchange for the money he offered her, and she leaves him to cry and goes to the city mayor, with whom she has a strong relationship. She uses her connection with him to request that he help her gain access to the bank. White's request is to get introduced to the investigators who are looking into the crime and ask them to treat her well and allow her to assist in solving the crime. She offers him a sum of money in exchange for his help, and he agrees. Meanwhile, Frasier has called the gang, but they refuse to answer or communicate with him. Team Jake manages to breach the cameras, but they are surprised that they malfunctioned as soon as Dalton entered disguised as a maintenance worker, due to the flashlight he directed at the cameras. Frasier learns that the flashlight was emitting infrared rays that the human eye cannot detect, but they affect electronic devices. At that moment, the gang brings out a hostage from the bank, with a metal plate hanging around his neck. The SWAT team rushes to him, believing he is part of the gang, but after confirming he is a hostage, they remove the plate from his neck and leave him to talk with Frasier, who cannot gather more information than what Jake learned from the previous hostage, such as the number of gang members and their armament. The plate that was around the hostage's neck contained a message for the police with the gang's demands, which included 2 large buses to transport the hostages and a private plane for them. If their demands were not met, they would kill a hostage every hour. Frasier sees that the demands are excessive and decides to leave the gang without a specific response for a while. At that time, Arthur, the bank manager, arrives at the scene and requests to meet with the investigators to know the latest developments in the crime. When he learns of the gang's demands, he quickly agrees to provide them, which surprises Frasier and his colleagues due to Arthur's unexpected reaction and visible tension. However, in the end, Frasier asks him to relax and assures them that they will solve the problem with minimal losses. Their conversation is interrupted by the sound of the SWAT team reporting that an armed man has exited the bank with one of the hostages, and they hand police a note stating that they need food sufficient for 50 people. Frasier thinks about listening in on the gang through highly accurate listening devices that they will plant in the pizza boxes they will bring into the bank. Indeed, the food is delivered to the bank, and Dalton himself goes out with the rest of the gang to carry the food inside. Frasier asks Dalton to respond when he calls the bank so they can reach a solution that satisfies all parties, but he ignores him and goes back inside. Frasier quickly enters to eavesdrop on them using the listening devices and hears a group of young people speaking Spanish, so he requests a Spanish translator immediately. Meanwhile, he hears someone speaking a strange language to him in another part of the bank, but he recognizes it as Albanian from one of the employees because his wife was Albanian. Frasier immediately summons her to translate for him, but he is shocked when he learns from her that they have a recorded tape of the former president of Albania. He realizes that the gang has understood their plan and is playing tricks on them. He confirms that they are a professional gang and not just amateurs. Inside the bank, one of the gang members is breaking the floor of the bank's storage room. Dalton approaches a child among the hostages and gives him some food. He sits down calmly and talks with the child about the game he is playing, to the point that the boy forgets he is sitting with the gang leader and doesn't feel afraid of him. Then Dalton goes to the vault and opens just one box out of all the boxes, which happens to be the same box that Arthur is trying to keep closed. Inside, Dalton finds the documents he was searching for, along with a large number of bags containing a significant amount of uncut diamonds. The mayor arrives with White, and they request to speak with Detective Fraser. The mayor introduces White to Fraser, stating that she might be able to help them solve the crime because her intelligence could lead them to a solution with the gang. However, Fraser feels that White has sinister motives and that her intentions are not just to help, but that she has a personal interest. Therefore, he negotiates with the mayor to agree to assist White, but on the condition that he gets a promotion, which was taken from him due to the money that disappeared from the last case he investigated, for which he was accused of stealing. Fraser states that he has nothing to do with the missing money and insists on the promotion in exchange for White's presence in the investigations. The mayor agrees, and when Fraser returns to the team, he contacts Dalton, who sarcastically calls him Mr. President, to show he knows they've discovered their game. Dalton tells him that it's a mistake to eavesdrop on them, and he knows he needs to meet his demands quickly, or he will carry out his threat and kill the hostages. Fraser tells him that it's difficult to arrange a plane, but Dalton responds that it's not his problem, and that he needs to handle it and prepare the plane by any means necessary. Fraser tries to calm him down to buy some time, assuring him that he will fulfill all his requests, but that he needs to ensure the safety of the hostages. Until he fulfills his demands, he will provide them with food. This time, Dalton has figured out their trick and requests sandwiches so they can't put them in boxes with surveillance devices. Fraser steps outside to talk to his girlfriend and apologizes for canceling their outing because he will be late for work due to the complexity of the case that has yet to be resolved. Afterwards, he goes to meet White, who is waiting for him at the restaurant near the bank. He calls Dalton again, but this time he lets White talk to him according to their agreement. White talks to him, stating that she has an offer for him, which will be the best offer he can get to come out of the crime with the least losses. She tells him they need to discuss it, but that the discussion can happen over the phone, so she asks him to let her enter the bank and meet him. Once she confirms that she has no connection to the police or investigators, he agrees to let her enter the bank. White enters the bank, and Dalton searches her before speaking with her. Then he stands a distance away from White, and she begins to talk, telling him to turn himself in, assuring him that he will only serve a maximum of 4 years in prison, but when he gets out, he will find money to compensate for his time served. She offers him $2 million in exchange for his surrender and not robbing the bank, stating that she can transfer the money to him before he surrenders so he can verify the truth of her words and ensure he receives the money. However, he realizes that her offer comes from the fact that she is working for Arthur, who is afraid of his secret getting out. He tells her the truth about Arthur, that when he was young, he allied with the Nazis and participated in the Holocaust, where thousands of people died, and that was in exchange for a huge sum that allowed him to go from an ordinary bank employee to the owner of a chain of branches of the largest bank in America. He informs her that he opened Arthur's box and took the documents that prove his claims, but he decides not to expose Arthur or speak about the documents. Instead, he plans to use them as leverage to avoid prison and leave the bank without facing consequences. Due to White's experience, she confirms that he will use the documents in a way that will harm Arthur, so she exits the bank and decides to leave the place after completing her task of protecting Arthur from disgrace. However, Fraser confronts her before she leaves and asks her what she discussed with Dalton and what they reached, but White evades him, refusing to give him a clear answer. However, she lets him know that he won't kill any of the hostages, as it's clear that he's not a killer. After that, she leaves him and walks away. Fraser decides that he needs to enter the bank and talk to Dalton himself, so he calls him and says he will arrange for the plane or buses, but on the condition that he enters the bank and makes sure all the hostages are okay. Dalton agrees, and Fraser goes to the bank. They check one of the gang members before taking them to the places they need to get them out of the bank quickly. They assure him they will leave, and after Fraser confirms the hostages' safety, he asks Dalton why he needs a plane, as it's impossible to escape by plane from the middle of the city. Dalton scoffs at him, saying that he's clearly been watching too many movies and wants to put them into practice, but Dalton replies that it's his problem, and he can handle it, and all they have to do is provide him with what he requested. Fraser offers him to surrender himself, stating that since he hasn't killed any of the hostages or robbed the bank, he will get a light sentence. He tells him that if he refuses his offer, the special forces will have to intervene and storm the bank, but he knows that the special forces can only attack if someone is killed from the hostages. Therefore, Fraser leaves Dalton the freedom to choose, stating that he's still sticking to his offer, and extends his hand for a handshake. But Dalton attacks Fraser, knocking him to the ground as he tries to immobilize him and remove the mask from his face to reveal his true identity. However, one of Dalton's men appears and threatens Fraser with a gun in his hand to back off from Dalton. At that moment, Dalton stands with his gun aimed at Fraser, but in the end, he doesn't kill him and throws him out of the bank, stating that he will regret deceiving him. Dalton then goes with one of his gang members to the storage room and checks on the work they're completing there. One of his men tells him they will have finished the hole they've been digging, and will have it ready as agreed after 3 hours. Fraser exits the bank, but only after confirming White's words that the gang leader's goal is not food and that he has no intention of harming any of the hostages, but instead uses them as a means to pressure the police to meet his demands. As soon as Fraser reaches the rest of the team, he receives a call from the bank, where Dalton tells him he turned on one of the cameras in front of the bank and is using it to see what's going to happen now. He immediately directs the jacket toward the camera at the office window, and sees 2 members of the gang standing in front of one of the hostages, covering her face with a cloth. Suddenly, they shoot her, and she drops dead instantly. At that moment, all of Fraser's expectations that the gang leader wouldn't be aggressive or harm the hostages vanish. The news reaches the police station manager, who is upset with Fraser because the hostage who died was due to his recklessness with the gang. He informs him that he has been removed from the investigation into the crime and that the new person in charge is Jake, who is preparing for an assault on the bank. It was difficult for them to find a plan that would ensure the safety of all the hostages because they didn't know what the gang members looked like or even what they were wearing, since everyone in the bank wore the same clothes and masks. They come up with the idea to attack the bank, throw gas bombs at them, and then shoot them with rubber bullets. At that point, everyone will faint without losing another hostage. Fraser hears the entire plan, and after everyone moves to prepare for the attack, someone speaks to Fraser and tells him that if the hostages get hurt because of the attack, Fraser will bear all the responsibility because the attack happened because of the hostage who was killed due to him. But Fraser isn't concerned about Bill's words because he knows he will be promoted no matter what happens due to the agreement he has with the mayor. While Fraser is talking to the precinct officer, he discovers something very important, so he goes back and looks at the metal board that had the message written on it. When he opens it, he discovers a listening device inside, which was the reason Dalton knew about all their plans and movements. After Fraser discovers the gang's trick, he communicates with them to stop the attack immediately because the gang knows all the steps they agreed upon. Dalton realizes that Fraser has discovered the truth, which is why he changes the plan and starts throwing gas bombs everywhere in the bank until the place fills with gas. Suddenly, the bank door opens, and all the hostages come rushing out at once, so the officers fire rubber bullets at them until Jake asks them to stop shooting, needing all the hostages. They have to treat each one of them as a criminal because they don't know who the real criminal is among them. Jake enters the bank with a group from his team, along with Fraser and Bill, and they search the place for any hostage or criminal, but they find the place completely empty. They discover that the money vault is just as it was, it hasn't been robbed, and they are shocked when they see the gang's weapons, which were fake weapons. They also find the cloth that covered the face of the dead hostage and discover that it has a substance that resembles blood, but it isn't real blood. They confirm that the gang wasn't intending to kill any of the hostages. After investigating everyone who was in the bank, the police station manager tells Fraser that the case has been closed because, after the investigation, the police couldn't identify the original criminal among the criminals, and the higher authorities didn't insist on continuing the case because there were no fatalities or any money stolen from the bank. Fraser is upset about the news and decides he will continue searching for the case himself until he can reach the real criminal and understand the reason behind the heist. Since no money was stolen, Fraser discovers while searching the case that there's a box in the bank that has no record, as if it doesn't exist. He guesses that all the answers to his questions will be found in that box, and that White's mission was to carry what's in the box. So he goes to meet White and asks her to confess to him what's in the box. She refuses to tell him the truth clearly but lets him know that the wealth Arthur obtained was due to his corruption. After that, White meets with Arthur and tells him that she completed the mission and that the papers are with Dalton as collateral for him, but he won't use them against him. They find out that no money was stolen from the bank, which is strange. She tells him that the reason they didn't steal the money is that they found more valuable things they could use to forego the money. At that moment, Arthur gets tense and tells her that the box contained a diamond ring belonging to the wife of a Nazi soldier worth millions of dollars, and the gang must have stolen it, but he doesn't mention the large amount he was hiding in the box. White takes a check from Arthur for the amount they agreed upon for the operation and leaves him and walks away. We see the room where Dalton was imprisoned, and where he confessed on camera to everything he did in the heist, which is why we learn that the room Dalton is in is the same room the gang prepared in the warehouse at the bank. After things settle down following the heist, Dalton decides to leave the bank quietly with the diamonds he stole without anyone noticing. The remaining gang members who left with the hostages are waiting outside the bank, but they are surprised when Fraser enters the bank with his assistant Bill, and they quickly call Dalton to inform him. However, Dalton is confident that he can leave without being discovered. He exits from the warehouse and comes up to the bank without anyone suspecting him. He bumps into Fraser's shoulder while leaving the bank, but Fraser doesn't recognize him. Finally, he leaves with his friends with the diamonds he stole from the box without anyone noticing and without any of them getting arrested. Their plan succeeds, and at that moment, Fraser has arrived at the box and requests permission from the police to open it. When he opens the box, he finds the ring along with a note from Dalton stating that he needs to know the story of the ring. He takes the ring and goes to White, telling her he discovered the truth about Arthur and why he was afraid for the box to be opened. After that, he goes to Arthur and shows him the ring, explaining that the ring revealed his truth, that he was among the traitors who supported the Nazis in their wars. This is confirmed by the diamond ring, which belongs to one of their wives. Finally, Fraser manages to uncover the truth, closes the case, and gets promoted at work. He returns home after a long day, and while placing his gun and police badge on the desk, he discovers a piece of diamond in his pocket. At that moment, he remembers the person he bumped into at the bank and realizes that he was the gang leader, and he is the one who placed the diamond in his pocket as a reward for him because he was confident Fraser would uncover the truth. Fraser laughs happily because he will be rich, and his life will change because of the piece of diamond. And here ends today's movie. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.